several other areas, and they vary a little bit based on country and based on age group, obviously, and also based on where you live. Okay, so if we take the wokeness first, which is definitely something that's so. If we look at, I'm paraphrasing this a little bit, but in the cities, people are woke, right? They like the woke stuff. They appeal to that. The journalists who write the co-ops and all these kind of things, they tend to be pro-woke. The young people are woke and so on. And you don't see it as a big issue, and all these. Well, you see it as a big issue, but you think it's the right direction. If you go to the countryside, people are definitely not woke, right?
Right.
And we see that very interestingly played out. So again, if I can use another Danish example, that is what I know most about. So we had another split out from the classical liberal party Venstre called Danish Democrats, the Danish Democrats, and on the surface, it looks like a populist right party. It looks sort of like anti-immigration, anti-woke, Eurosceptical, and so on. If you look at the actual policy, it's completely centrist, right? It's just like, it's just the veneer, the painting, so to speak, dressing up the bride, as we used to say in private equity, right? The bride is dressed up a little bit different, but so it will appeal to like an anti-woke countryside, maybe working class voter, right? They have the biggest working class following now. Their actual policy will be very close to what the government is currently doing, right? So it's interesting. So so getting back to the other question, what else are people worried about? Young people are worried about climate change, right? Obviously. And they're worried about it in a really weird way where it tends to take up a lot of their mind, but they don't actually read that much about it. It's a really interesting thing. There's a lot of misconceptions around that issue, especially when you compare to how much people think about it. And I sometimes compare it with being really madly in love, but never checking the social media profile of the person you love.
Right.
So that's sort of like sort of what I compare it to sometimes. And then, of course, in Europe, particularly, welfare state reform. That is big, right? So it's different. The issue is different in various countries, but all the welfare states do need fundamental reforms in Europe, and that's going to hurt a lot of voting groups, especially the median voters. So there's a struggle now to figure out how do you make sure the people you hurt are not the people voting for you, right? So that is in a country in countries with big public sectors, which is several of the European countries, of course, a big issue, because if you work in the public sector as it is now, you will fear change, right? So, are you going to vote for a party that will reform the public sector? Probably not. But if you don't reform the public sector, it won't be there. It's at that level now, right? And that's definitely something that spans. And then the last thing, I mentioned many things now. Sorry, I hope you bear with me.
Good.
There's also a demographic thing at play here, because we know, especially in redistributive democracies, that in order to get your piece of the cake, you don't need to be a big group, but you need to be well organized and liked, right? And on the one end of the voting scope, we have an actually pretty big group, and they're very well organized, and they're generally liked, and that's the elderly, right? They are like, and they vote, right? And then on the other end, we have a group that are generally disliked now, which is a newer thing in policy, and not very well organized and very heterogeneous, and that is young people, right? So you're going to see a generational struggle across European welfare system, which is going to be interesting to follow, to say the least. Right?
Yes, for sure.